super excited to host Michael Wickerson. I've been following his Grasshopper experiments for a while and he's doing so much interesting work. And I thought I have to get him on the show and like talk about his journey and how he thinks about these ideas. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, for having me. I have watched your blog, and like I said, I met you on a Hypar hackathon briefly, and I know your team took home a prize. That was back, had to be 2020, I think.
Yeah, it has been a while. So Michael, for people who knows you from LinkedIn, uh, can you walk us through like your early career days, how you navigated that? Yeah.
I can, and I would ask you just to interrupt me, and I'll prompt you to interrupt me at least every year. But I know people out there that kind of follow me. First thing, I seem like a bit of a chaotic kind of charlatan. Like I throw everything out. I don't know what I'm doing. In a sense that if I've done things on Patreon, I've done things on PayUp, but I always try and just find out if people are looking at GitHub, like if they're actually taking my files. But whenever things get set, I do put those public forums out. And if you are interested in my work, I would say look at the YouTube channel from beginning to end. And I'll just talk about the YouTube channel and what I've done. And please take a look at the 100 and plus repositories that are just full of everything I've done linearly. The only things that are private are the works that I'm trying to do. And hopefully I can end with that. So I'll just start that I've been working as a foundry man and a metal caster and a metal worker for probably 25 years. But that was following a couple of years at the University of Waterloo in math and computers. And math and computers have been with me since my earliest days, with the earliest computers I think I can think about. And I was just always interested in scripting algebraically geometry. I always wanted to see it, and I always wanted to see it on a computer. But fast forward from 1990 to about 2009, I bought 12 acres of land, and I made my first YouTube video, which was, I think, just a survey of my land. It had nothing digital, nothing computational. My world was just cutting down trees, working Adobe, earth structures. And the next video didn't take place for 6 years. And that was when we kind of were preparing to go home. My school had put in a wonderful fab lab. This is the Kansas City Art Institute. And I really had to answer why we did that. And I said for two reasons. I needed to do it. And I needed to do it. I needed to do it for myself, but I needed to do it for my employment. And I had a very early start that anybody could step into with the most simplest of programs. If you think about things like Tinkercad or Scratch, but Tinkercad had a code blocks program, and you were able to just drag in nodes, which was my first taste at scripting. I was a pure mathematician. I never did anything in computers, and if I did, it was on paper. Our tests were actually on paper. They weren't on computers. And the code blocks just clicked, and I realized you could export and import to much better programs, these geometries as meshes. And I popped them right into Rhino. My school gave me the license. I bought it, I think, for $190 at the time. And immediately I started looking at tutorials. And the tutorials were all these, if you recall in Rhino, these 15-minute test tutorials so people could get certified. But it was a student, I have to plug, Mal Murr, from an interactive arts program that said, take a look at this Grasshopper. And when I saw Grasshopper, it just was exponential. I was like, why would I ever push and pull anything around if I could conceive of it in kind of a controlling parametrically in inputs? And it's taken a long time for me to really think about things simply like a programmer. I only deal now with inputs of integers, floats, booleans, maybe some strings, some files. And my outputs are point clouds, vector fields, and maybe some planes. But I try not to output more than curves, surfaces, and certainly not solids. This is so I can speed up what's happening. And for people that watch what I do now, it will make sense. If I can plug another person, Daniel Kristev, who's now an acrobatic busking clown internationally, incredible, came through Australia in videos on Grasshopper while he was in school were the most computational, mathematical, excitable functions I'd ever seen, and they've never left me. At the same breath, a fellow in Italy picked me up and said, "Why don't you join this group, Fans Grasshopper, Pier Nicola Mussolino?" And this fellow just believed in me. He was like, "I see something in you." And I don't think we ever talked in person, but his encouragement was enough to start. And at that point, I'd been teaching in a digital class. And from then till now, as a teacher, I have run an elective called the Human Hand in Digital Sculpture, parametric design, algorithmic design, computational design, and more recently, um, lucid dreaming and open AI. And I'll be teaching in rotation that human hand and digital sculpture again. So maybe just taking a break, I then can talk about other things that inspired me and how I go at Grasshopper. But if you don't know, I've just started out of homage to this artist that I always liked as a kid, Bob Ross. So I can kind of talk about what motivates me to do this kind of Bob Ross of architecture. Somebody reached out at a time a few years back and said, "You might be the Beeple of Grasshopper." I don't think I achieved anything like that, but that's where I was. So I'll hesitate because that's going from about 2018 to 2019. And if you
Oh
want me to
man.
continue, I can continue. I've got kind of a script, but I didn't want to over talk you, Mayor.
No, no, like this is like I could listen on and on. You have like such an exciting and
Well,
journey.
well, let me keep going because I think if you can't substitute, also I'm in my 50s now, and the physical wear and tear of being a foundryman and casting bronze and zinc and aluminum, doing this regularly at home, my 12 acres. I'm actually getting rid of one of my massive furnaces today. I'm kind of done with this, and they were industrial sized things, but for those that are in Grasshopper, I will say programs like Mode Labs really rubbed off. But it was when my mind clicked that I realized all those nodes at the top of Grasshopper. I realized that if I could learn 60% of what was in math, vectors, and sets, I could do 90% more than anything I'd ever achieved prior to that. And in doing so, my problems were translating text from Genesis to the Tao Te Ching to solving problems, to playing games, making puzzles for myself. And the only way I can compare Grasshopper in my life was I picked up a banjo probably in 2008, and I'd just play it. Like I'd walk and play it. And I would listen to music, I would copy it. I became pretty proficient. And sadly, I kind of left that as well, like many other things in my life. But if you find something in your life as a young child, say it was Dungeons and Dragons, or say it was karate and memorizing moves, or playing the guitar, or doing mathematics, you'll find that that really helps you step into this. And although I've seen criticism, in like 2000, I just started cranking out nonsense scripts just to learn the program. And a lot of people say, well, why learn like, and I did a series called 1001 Grasshopper Definitions in Modulations, but I just did as many as I could. And one of the scripts tucked in the middle of that was I took a Rhino 5 book by Ron Cheng and I translated the bubble car into one monster grasshopper spaghetti script. And I think everybody
Whoa.
has to do that. They have to make this ridiculous one parameter mega script that every single part of that car, transmission, brake, wheels, tires, body, was adjusted. And that's this absurdity of working with Grasshopper, a very heavy script, always crashing, but you kind of have to do that. And the other path I avoided was I kind of avoided plugins because I knew plugins were written in C sharp. And I knew I didn't know C sharp. I didn't even know Python at the time, but I was like, what should I do to get closer to these plugins? Mind you, there were plugins I really liked. Lunchbox, because of its machine learning little nodes, plus its geometries. Kangaroo, because of its physics solvers. And Fologram AR allowed me to push things into augmented reality. At that point, I was teaching, and I would not let any of my students make a CAD model that was symmetrical and didn't deal in multiples. I found the tendency was, and I do it sometimes in my scripts, and I'm very critical of it, like to really get an A+ in my class, you couldn't just model something symmetrical and do a single unit. That wasn't the power of working. I'd be more interested if you started my class learning a CAD program, let's say Rhino or Blender, but you ended up writing Python or C sharp for it by the end. And that's asking for a big jump in 3 months of classes. But my elective, because I'm still teaching the sculpture majors, picks up students from every walk of life, and all those coders and computer people that ended up in art school but didn't, all those engineers and architects that didn't end up in engineering and architecture. Just like I started in pure math, but I ended up in printmaking and foundry through my undergrad. There's 3 companies I've worked for commissions in town in Kansas City. One is the A. Zahner Company, worth checking out architecturally, producing works for Frank Gehry, Jan Hendricks, and the like. The other one is Dimensional Innovations, that allowed me, and I've seen a lot of my peers and colleagues gravitate to engineers in these companies. They allowed me to be a visiting scholar that could show up Thursdays on a non-disclosure agreement and contemplate. So I really just walked around this massive facility, building facility, and saw the power of it. And their innovation lab under Paul Martin and Brandon Wood was just, they had a large-scale additive manufacturing printer that could do, I swear you could do about 6 cars in it, and you could router them on the other side. And then the other company is any design build centers in town. But to see my alumni that gravitated to knowing how to work computationally or through CAD programs, they ended up landing the jobs at places like Huft. So those 3 are the big giants to me for artists and engineers and architects to find work in Kansas City. And then enter the GH Python node. And maybe we should take a little lull because we're going into about 2001. I went nuts with the GH Python node when I realized that even though it was Iron Python and Python 2.0, at that point, I started to pick up from Parametric Camp and Jose Luis. I saw that C# was completely learnable. I'd read enough, gotten to the classes and inheritance, and gotten to a few things like, what are they called? Decorators and things like this. I got to more advanced understanding of Python. Then I realized C# with the correct prompts. This is before any Copilot or GPT. Like, you could learn C# from Parametric Camp 2 ways. I used to go to the gym and just listen to it while I was running. I didn't even need a computer in front of me to listen to that guy's teaching because he's a genius. And then you could also sit in the bathtub and listen to this guy's stuff, and you could visualize what he was scripting. I mean, this guy was incredible. So I did start going hard into GitHub. I knew I could lay some found work with LinkedIn, and I built up to about 18,000 followers. They come on board and they drop. And when I did Facebook, it caps you at 5,000, but I must have made about 16 to 20 Facebook groups. And anything that piqued my interest, I would start another group. And it's absurd because I think I'm the only one, but some of those groups are up to like 5,000 people. And so that tells me what I should be working on. Take a little lull. There are people out there that are absolutely incredible. Junichiro Horikawa, pushing Grasshopper into Unity, was possible years ago with his work. Robotics was possible through Carl Singlein's KUKA PRC. These people I've since kind of gravitated away from. They've found their professions. They know what they need to do. I kind of just got the greatest hits from all of these people. And then the AEC community was really linked. The American University in Cairo reached out to me. Ahmed Hassab and Omar Gennady in a robotics class. These courses I take for a weekend. I remember I was doing a robotics class and a tree in my front yard took out all my power. And I had to go to the library for a week, and I missed the first session. But I didn't meet the professors. I met the technicians that would teach you everything. They'd show you every single step of every single script. And of course, I'm dependent on anything that I have to go back to as any dependencies. I was also doing an entrepreneurial degree. I decided, well, I can't just be dressed for sculpture for the rest of my life. I better put on a suit. I don't know if it was a suit, but I went in and I had an entrepreneurial idea to make a digital foundry. And this was at a time that globally, or at least nationally, most foundries, metal foundries that were staying in business had picked up some type of digital capability. Like they had to move into the digital realm. And at that point, I finally downloaded the plugin Python Remote. And GH Python Remote allowed you to pull in every single interesting Python library you wanted. And I had a huge spike in people watching what I was doing. I grabbed a book about 100 pages long called One-Liners for Python, and I learned how to write quick, fast, efficient code that crossed over into this wonderful world of, well, I would have called it statistics, which was a course I didn't do well in undergrad, but it's machine learning. So once you start to visualize statistics, this is where I get really excited, because now I can start to return to mathematics. The WAM workshop, the welded additive assist manufacturing large scale workshop, was the one I did in Cairo. And I must admit, Ahmed Hassab has done very well with his initial group, MGSM. And that got me in touch with Sujay Kamari, a roboticist in Mumbai, India. But the three of us were able to run a weekend class. And since then, he's put me as a consultant on what I think is turning into quite a good organization, the Engineering Institute for Integrated Development and Technology out of Estonia. And I look at that and I'm so honored to have my picture in that group of people assisting, because I also have my picture at the Kansas City Art Institute in another type of life in America. And so I like trying to make sense of who I am between this. The only plugin I did was I reached out to Daniel Kristev, and he produced the Dominion plugin, which was a very boring, hyperbolic study of why can't you make a parabola in Grasshopper. And Dominion, it's funny, we met up with another guy, Peter Davis, in Germany. We kind of were looking at the Dominion as a name because it was the old name of England before it was the they call it like it was like England had, like, I was Canadian but living in America. Peter Davis was English, living in Germany. Daniel Kristev was Bulgarian born, but he was down in Australia. So it was like, where's this Dominion of England residing? Like, where are these people? So we gave it a funny name, and we never did anything after that together. And I think Daniel really went off in his physical way of running marathons and all of this tightrope walking and bike racing. The guy's just a genius. So that was the only development. I do want to do a plug because I think it would be funny, because what happened with Grasshopper 2.0 is they found all the plugins that were really awesome and they integrated it and they became highly computational. But I should probably stop for a second. We're at about 2002 and about to enter hops, which is hops and Flash were just amazing. Are you still there, Mayor? You're frozen up a bit. Are you there? Okay, you're moving.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have, and there's Sujay Kamari. I just mentioned that he just jumped on. Hi, Michael. Okay, Sujay. It's been a while. I know he's down teaching, like, I think it's a young school for children. And we've talked on and off about stuff that's more approachable by young children. And actually, I look at it as if they had given me these tools in grades 7 and 8 when I was doing like 100% tests on all of my exams, and I was incredible in high school, I have to admit, top of my class in algebra, math, and calculus. That was the reason I went to pure math. But I wish I was in a position with a teacher like Sujay when I was 7 and 8, and who knows what would have happened, but that's another life. Enter hops.
Yeah, I know,
When I
Sujay.
realized,
Small world.
anything you want to say? Sorry, Mayor, I'm just talking through the whole thing.
No, no. I just say, like, I know Sujay personally. So small world.
Yeah. Oh, I realize how small it is. Mahmoud Ramdan working, and if I contact him and he's in Morocco, I swear, if you have 3 dozen people in this world that know you and encourage you, they maybe don't understand what you're doing, they don't believe in what you're doing, and they don't know what you're doing. But if they can recognize, if they really recognize you're doing something, that's enough. Just like make them sit with it one night in their head and be like, what are they doing? Like, why are they doing that? And I think that's enough to motivate me, because it's those people that are out there doing things I don't talk with, but I really want to know where that energy comes from. I've always thought, well, with hops, the Copilot was coming into place, and I could start seeing my scripts written incredibly fast, and I could write hops plug apps, Python apps that could translate a book. I could pick up a book on anything. Like I could pick up a book on NumPy, on pandas. Like I could pick up machine learning books, anything, and hops would just start popping these nodes into my Grasshopper canvas. And I was like, what am I going to do with this data? But if you bring it in light and you bring it out light, those are your real parameters. I think number sliders are the parameter that gets the node editor working, but that node editor really is your prompt and primer for something. And that's where I end up going. I found Grasshopper 2.0 when it came out. People like Gediminas Kerdikis, I hope I'm not saying their name wrong. They were trying to show an overview of what this does. I went pretty deep into Grasshopper 2.0 because it had a lot of statistics, it had a lot of math, and it had a lot of visualization of functions being able to be brought together the way they do in calculus. And calculus definitely was my favorite subject. So I translated Euclid's Elements book, the first book of it. I started to just take the proofs, and this was before you could do an image prompt. I was just typing in the text to what the proof was. I was typing in calculus books. I was typing in Richard Feynman's lectures. If I had an image prompt, I just put up his chalkboard drawings. And Rhino 7 had come out, and it was hops, hops, hops forever. And I have them online, and I think in the GitHub account, they're just like hops A, hops B, hops C. And it's just like whatever book fancied in the summer. And you have to realize my GitHub spikes in the summer and winter because I have no time to do anything from September to December and from January to May. So I only have these little pockets that I can really go hard. And today is the first day of that holiday. So NumPy, Pandas, having a little trouble but getting it in there, scikit-learn, all of these things like Matplotlib. What if you weren't limited by Jupyter notebooks? And I was looking at that, but I was like, what if I wasn't limited by the visuals of Seaborn and Matplotlib? What if I just took the data and I could see it as what I believe a piece of architecture is? It is a algorithm. I think a piece of architecture right down to what it is. When you look at a building, I believe you could see that as a script. And maybe that's not something architects want to hear, but to me, it's just a visualization like city planning of a really good algorithm that plays out. And that's probably, people would have I'd get into arguments with that, but we're entering 2023, the fall, when ChatGPT opened up, and Peter Davis, who I collaborated on in the Dominion, sent me a single node, said, don't market it, just get it out there and get it doing things. And I was dragging ChatGPT nodes from Grasshopper 1 into Grasshopper 2 and finding a way to string together text so I could generate geometries. That was probably the most chaotic thing I think I ever did, somewhat successfully, somewhat not. But I did return back to Grasshopper 1, and I feel bad because I think Grasshopper 2.0 is going to be just incredible. And that really brings me up to date with where I am now. And we should take a lull, but if you don't know the projects I'm on really hard now, my method is simple. Get exhausted on what you're doing, run into a wall, get frustrated, stop, and literally sit in bed and just take a day off, take a few weeks off. Think what's possible. And when the image prompt came out, there's an Instagram of math type. I'd done some things with Wolfram Mathematica before, but when I saw that math type image prompts of algebraic formulas could be brought into beautiful, perfect code almost immediately with Python or C# with the correct prompting, and then see it in Rhino, this was insane because my mind had looped around and said, why am I, because I was showing Grasshopper node scripts to GPT to tell me what the image would be, and then it was telling me this, and then I was like, why don't I just show it what I want it to be? Why don't I just show it what the Rhino image is and have it scripted? So I've come at it forwards and backwards and upside down, but my passion is to be able to just grab the math type formulas. I would love to be able to input an entire white paper on somebody's PhD and start to see the visualization with my creative impulses. This is no different than the artists like Kandinsky and Paul Klee, and the ones that when you look at their paintings, they arrest you because you might actually see aesthetics as it's intended, which is music, balance, proportion, variety, compositions, like all of these things are there. I think all of those paintings or visuals or sculptures, even though I've moved away from a lot of those, to me, they get recognized in the mind, and then I can start to see them come out. And of course, I like to throw things through animations. So Blender, I started to do things in. They had a wonderful Python script editor. I was like, let's just do some rigged and let's do some keyframed animations. And then my wife was working on AR Spark for the Meta, and I was like, I'll just do some AR Spark planar installations and make it an augmented reality. And then that leads me to my 3 private repos still that I'm working on. I'm doing Andrew Ng's machine learning class, but instead of doing it in Jupyter notebooks, I'm doing it in Grasshopper. So just like I read that Rhino 5 book and translated it into a Grasshopper script, I'm trying to translate Andrew Ng's classes into Grasshopper just for my own sake to do it. I also went nuts on Flask and 3JS because the animations in 3JS are wonderful. But I figured out about
Nice.
a week and a half ago how to use parameters to slide in Grasshopper to change my 3JS models. And I'm just like, am I really doing this? Like, is this really happening? And it's pretty simple stuff. But I was like, that is working. And then the one I slowed down on because I want to get people watching me again is I said, let's get started with this simple math type image prompts, which is what I do 2-3 times a day. I do it without sound. People are like, you have no sound. I said, I'm not really teaching here. I'm just figuring it out. But when I get that figured out, I'm going to go back into that Flash 3JS and my machine learning. And I know it frustrates people because they're like, how come all that early stuff's free and these things you put a nominal fee on? If you call me, you'll see in those chats, somebody will be like, I want to look into this. All you have to do is tell me you have interest, and I'll make you a collaborator on those GitHub sites. Like I don't really care. I'm a little bit of a. I know where everybody is this morning. They're watching Bitcoin go through the roof. So if I got to make $5, I'll watch. I'll play Bitcoin coinage, or I'll go to work, or I'll do an extra commission. But I do think the monetary nominal does let me know. So if people are interested in the machine learning, then I'll do more of that. If they're interested in the Flash, and I just gave out to somebody, Paras, I'm trying to think, well, I shouldn't mention him, but he just asked on a last thing I did yesterday. He's watching the getting started, but he says, I know you were doing something with 3JS. I've never written a script, a line of script in 3JS or HTML. Like all I've ever done is Grasshopper, Rhino, C# and Python, and then go back 30 years. I did Fortran, I did Maple, I did Pascal, I did
Oh.
C++. I was like, that's where I came from. So I think I'm done. That's where I'm at. That's what I wrote down. And all I did this morning, Mayor, to prepare for that was I just scrolled through 1,000 videos on YouTube. What I just described is exactly in order to my old Medium, my old like pages I used to do. And you might get lost in my past if you look too deep, and you'll find there's no computers for about 30 years. So there's just this making of sculpture. But that's me in a nutshell. And I'm passionate about it. I don't listen to what other people say, and nobody tells me what to think, at least when it comes to this in my life. I have a wife and 3 kids, so I listen to them. But when it comes to this craft, it's like playing the banjo. And when I get something cool enough, then I'll play it for other people. I think that's it. And I'm getting gray. Oh my goodness. All right. I was going to dress up. This is about as dressed as I get. Put on a shirt.
Oh, I must
That's it.
admit, Michael, like your passion towards this is very like admirable. I could it's contagious the way you think, and even the discipline you
I
have
appreciate
for
you.
like the 1,000 days. Yeah.
Well, I'm there for the students, and I am following. I don't know what the students are coming in with. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but as a teacher, I heard it from. It could have been Peter Davis. You want no? It was the interactive arts chair at the time, David Overholt, who studied under Daniel Schiffman, and he ran our interactive art program, which all those students gravitated to other programs after it closed up. And he said, you just want to look about 3 months ahead of that student. You want to be able as a teacher to kind of know what direction it's going. Of course, that's becoming more and more difficult. But I am motivated mostly by students that take my digital elective that are in film, that are in painting, that are in fiber. All of these people that played with Unity in high school, that never played with it in foundation, these lost skills of modifying Minecraft, all of these things. How is any of that digital modeling not somewhat sculptural, or the way sculptors would kind of think, or engineers or architects would think? So my main goal is to never shy away from an artist that realizes they should be able to have conversations with programmers, computational designers, architects, and engineers. It's the only way to get into a project management job in any of those companies I mentioned earlier. You have to be able to have that language. Some people would argue you don't if you're really well established, but a lot of my students and my peers and colleagues, they're not that well established as those giants. But all you have to do is get online, and I probably spend too much time on the phone. So
Nice.
trying to
And
read again and be a little aesthetic and a little Spartan in what I do, that's always an issue. But you'll see that when I put something online, it's what I'm learning. I have no inhibitions. I don't care if it fails totally. I'm sorry if you waste 30 minutes watching a video and don't like what comes out of it. But I also know people that have been motivated me from the very start, like Parametric House. They do reach out and just a little comment saying, hey, I've always kind of watched. And I've fallen out of touch with a few people, but when I first got started, there'd be a couple of people online that'd be like, I don't know this person. I don't know what they're doing. They're kind of like, and I felt kind of like an outlier in the field. And I really enjoy the outliers approach to bronze casting, to metalworking, to Adobe building, to clay making and everything. So, and I still love painting. My University of Waterloo gave me a wonderful undergrad in visual arts. So I came through there really appreciating at the time what was in the curriculum. It's had to change since then.
nice. I
So
want to know
yeah.
your opinion on like, can you teach a student to be a computational thinker?
Um,
Or
that's you. Well, what happens in my class, because that's only the experience I have, and these are undergrads. They come in with nothing. They come in with not right mouse, left mouse, and they don't know Blender. Sometimes I don't pick the software anymore. It's any software they want. Come midterm, a month and a half in, they've tried out some Rhino, Blender, some script editing, some node scripting, geometry nodes. They tried out some Grasshopper. Maybe some have gone to Revit and Dynamo. It's up to them. They go back to AutoCAD. But at midterm, I stop and I say, who wants to get supplies and get physical? Because I have a wonderful facility. I have furnaces, I have TIG welders, I have MIG welders. Who wants to start making? And who wants to start producing in the Fab Lab? Who wants to start laser cutting? Who wants to start 3D printing? I would say it's a very small class. And the reason that I've run it under 5 different names is so the same student can take it 5 different times. They can take it first semester, sophomore, second semester, sophomore, but they can't get credit if I don't change the name. So the course changes as they evolve. And usually by their 4th year, they take a directed study with me. And the only directed studies I do are with computational design students. And we have a student in painting right now making Unreal Engine fully animated figures with Blender and the GIS downloads for like, it's incredible what Red's doing. And I'm watching them move to game design, probably one of the best and half a dozen people in our school doing it. But I should say at that halfway part in the first class you take with me, if you start to think computationally and you start wanting to learn Python, that's one of my most exciting things to watch, because recently we had a student, a fiber student, that said, I think I love the code. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, I know we have GPT and I can get it to write it, but I like writing the code. This fiber artist that used to do stitch after stitch likes to write the code. And I'm like, just keep taking the class. We'll keep looking into this and we'll find out where it goes. But they're falling in love with coding, which is amazing for a fiber student to come to, because the earliest computers were textiles. They were these patterns of pulling out these beautiful patterns within it. The other type of student will find Touch Designer and go crazy. And I'll be like, oh my goodness, now I have to go find a gallery like the Digital Dreams Gallery in KC. Where can we show this work? Where can we get it on a billboard? I love this elective class, and all senior faculty, especially ones that have been chair, they get a release time when they're chair, but when they're not chair, you get that elective back. And I think of Karen McCoy that was doing an environmental course, dealing with the environment, doing wonderful things. Jim Leedy was doing things in clay and earth. They all had this way that I aspired to. Our school kind of leaves you alone when you've been there 25 years and you have an elective. It's your special projects class. But if I see students move to scripting, the trick is to keep them in our school. A lot of them are like, I think I want to go get an engineering degree. I think I want to go back. Or I'll find a student that was in engineering that drops out, comes to art school and realizes they have this computational skill. So I simply say I'm a foundry man with computational tendencies. And my child had to say what their dad did on a piece of paper. And I think it's on the fridge right now. And he listed me as Foundry Man with computational
Uh,
tendencies. And I was like, he must be listening. He's 14. But I also was a dad that you don't want to have, because if we have a long ride, we're doing probabilities. Like I just say you have a bag of marbles, 25 red marbles, 3 green marbles. What's the probability? And we'd go to hockey games and I'd make him do this. Or last year, I'd pay him his allowance to how many physics books, because I knew he needed to start learning about acceleration and derivatives. So he did incredible in school, but I love those games. And I didn't say it enough, but I absolutely have a mind that if I can make a curve, my most recent video is silent. And I've made an algorithm that will kind of type fit a NURBS curve to another line. And a lot of people will look at that and be like, what kind of model is that? But that's not a machine learning algorithm doing your work for you. That's you visually getting into the math, realizing that a lot of mathematicians named curves. Like that's what they did. And then if you think of the power of single and double variable calculus, what that implies, and what really the surface of the earth, the surface of people's bodies, like the beautiful forms that are everywhere. I try and prove to my students that the beautiful curves can be appreciated mathematically. And the main seminar for me in my class is, and this is a question I would love to have a talk with you on, is math inherent in nature, or is math our structure for us to at least see nature? And this gets into complex numbers and things like this, but it's like, some people will say, oh, nature is just mathematical. I think I'm more on the side that nature is what nature is, physics is what physics is, and math is our only lens, our only filter to see it. And I think of it more as kind of a tinted ski goggle, right? The people that have the tinted ski goggles, they see the snow as orange. Everybody else without the ski goggles just sees white snow. But I think if you can use that math, and I think that's a good analogy for the goggles, because in the future, we're going to have students coming in with these GPT earbuds. You're going to be giving an art lecture. You're going to get your date wrong, and they're going to correct you. Like students are going to come in with this intelligence augmentation through their glasses. These are my smart glasses that I should show you right here. There's a burned foundry mark. As soon as I bought my smart glasses, I was testing aluminum, and it went through my shield and it burned my glasses. They've since stopped working. They only did audio, but I would augment myself at my school. And just to end with an absurdity, and I'll try and let you talk, I used to record my YouTube videos kind of slow, and I'd talk slow, and people would be like, why are you talking slow? And I said, well, I wanted to know if I could go into my classroom with a half an hour lecture recorded on my phone on YouTube, and I could just listen to myself and repeat myself. So I did this for a day, and my students were like, what is he doing? He's talking half as fast. Well, I was just listening like earbuds to what I was saying and seeing if they were interested in the lecture. I think back to your original question, are students teachable computationally? I would say they have found a way into it. If they were dungeon masters writing rooms and monsters and writing this out, they probably thought computationally. If they were cooks and they knew how to write beautiful recipes, or if they knew how to do a kata in karate, I think they think computational. And there's so many things we drop in our life that I always feared, like, what if I stop being an artist? What if I stop being a mathematician? What if I stop karate? What if I stop all these other things that I found interesting? Because my life shows examples of that. I do think I can also prove that if you took an interest earlier in life, like pure math, find your way into something else for a couple of decades, you can come back to it. So is somebody teachable to it? You have to somewhat. I mean, either you're born completely computational and forget it, or we actually pick it up along the way. But if you exercise it like a language, I think our liberal arts class should pick up my coding class as a credit for credit. I don't think it should be a studio class. I think my coding classes and my digital classes should be more on the academic the academic liberal arts sessions, as opposed to a 3-hour studio, because you know your student that's taking your class to get a B or a C, and you know the students that are going home and spending 400 hours that term trying to pick up Unreal Engine or something like this. I'm not that interested in a student modeling in Rhino or Blender
Mm.
or any other program like you would with clay. Because I just, at this point, you can talk to a computer and it can make your clay vessel from what you're saying. But it seems to
Yes.
me like, why would you try and model that way with something to mimic clay or wax if you could just do it in clay or wax? So that's why I think
Mm.
the computational, getting into the math and seeing that abstraction, if you partner with GPT or with Copilot and you let it show you some simple curves and your imagination runs it into another form, you're never going to get a job to do that because the job's
Yeah.
going to want you to do specific things and optimize it. But I don't have a job like that. I have a very creative job that sculpture can be anything from stone carving to augmented reality. So there's nothing that I can't take within this. So to me, I think we will find, you'll see a lot of my prompts are make it complex, make it funky, make it jazzy, or make it beautiful. Because GPT is trying to figure that out. I don't know if it's training me or if I'm training it, but I'm starting to think the computer is teaching me to talk more with it. That's a lot, and I
Yes.
love to talk. If you keep looking at me, I'll keep talking, Mayor. I can talk anybody out of the room, and they have something to do. I don't know what our time's like, but I really did appreciate this, Mayor, that you allowed me just to speak without having to show slides. And I think it's enough that I've reflected on that. I really want people to know that if it isn't forks, like you don't fall into a rabbit hole, you fall into a rabbit maze, and there's so many possibilities down there that if you just keep digging, you're just going to keep finding things that interest you. And you can always, you can always redirect. Okay, I think I've ranted. I
Nice.
think I did well there.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
long.
No, it is. From what I got to know about you, my guess is you like three blue, one browns videos.
Oh my god! I wish I was,
The
and I
YouTube.
also know how ignorant I am when I see people like Sunderland's work. It just, they were in math at Waterloo. If you wanted to stay in the dorms and do well in school, you went up. You started on these floors like Animal and Fubar and all these places, and you were in math, and more than 90% of your friends in those floors drop out of math. But if you had a question you couldn't get through, up in the loft, there was this group of seniors, and they were all physics majors.
Mm.
They were, because I think to be in physics, you have to be a genius just to get in. And you could walk up there, and they would never have taken your class, and they could look at your paper and give you the answer. And I have two nephews that have moved through physics and computer science at Waterloo, and I cannot even come close. Maybe on a IQ test when it's a visual puzzle, I can maybe beat them. But there is this IQ and this ability that there are people like Three Brown, One Blue and Junichiro Horikawa. And I have to think, like Richard Feynman says, there are no special people. Like, he's just a normal person. I love this video. He says they practiced hard. And I suppose if I was more interested in the visuals and the tools, and I can guarantee that if CAD programs weren't being built in the late 80s and they had already existed, I probably would have done all this 30 years earlier, because I had to wait for those tools. I wasn't smart enough to build them. I didn't have the insight. And quite honestly, I wasn't mature enough at 19 and 20 to do those things. But now seeing and reflecting on it, those tools, I don't know. If you set yourself to it, it has to be similar to a language. And languages can't be learned at home in a book. You have to go to Bulgaria, you have to go to Poland, you have to travel, and you start picking up the language. You have to hang around the Legion halls. You have to hang around like wherever people are. And if somebody's in your family that you can do it daily, and if you can make a community for it, we really, in the sculpture department, have built a loft, and that is a non-departmental loft, the way MIT talks about their non-disciplinary programs at graduate level. My goals are not mine personally. My joy will come from seeing my alum and my students that I've had a bit of an influence on start to fall back into those positions, because it wasn't unheard of in the 70s and 80s. People would end up, like a fellow Sean Brixey, who's a friend of mine and an alumni from my school before my time. He's now at VCU, but he ended up at MIT early in his life, and he transformed my school of York University from a visual arts school into the amped program that it is today. He was really pioneering that. And when he comes back to our school, he sees his old studio, and he always can tell me, you still have to catapult 15 years in the future to be 20 years behind. Like he's always that attitude. And I
Oh.
was like, oh my goodness, because the only robot I get to play with is a virtual robot. That's the only way. Nobody's going to give me a lethal
Mm,
robot, even though I do like the idea of setting chainsaws at the end of ones and milling
mm,
sand molds and casting metal. But I do think I'm old enough to realize a lot of those tasks for safety and for health reasons should be automated. So I'm kind of
mm.
running around the bush here and trying to mention a few people that mean a lot to me. There is Mary Neubauer, who's worked, I think, with Jose Luis Garcia out of the University of Arizona University. They evaluated my program and they're just like, Mike, like, why all these interests? Like, where is this all coming from? It was a mix of the facilities changing to it a little bit. It was me wanting to be a lifelong learner and not stop. And also, I want to see the students, what they're coming in with. I really stop and we have conversations about where their skill sets are, and students are proficient. High school students are so proficient. And there's this test in India. Is it the JEE? This kind of
Yeah,
paper
yeah.
test? That was called. When I look at that,
I
that
give
was
it.
at the top of my game. Like when I was in grade at the 5th year of high school in Ontario, had an Ontario academic credit, and you had to be knowing how to solve these. You had to get a few points on the Descartes exam. And I miss the fact that my mind was doing those things. I miss the fact that your
Mm,
brain, when you stop practicing, they say with the piano, if you don't practice this today, if you don't practice this week, your audience might know. If you don't practice today, your closer friends might know, your family. But if you don't practice every day, you're going to know. But if you take a hiatus from it and you don't, it comes, it does, like that one guy always does, explode when your mind opens up. Like
mm.
recently, I've been doing this cumbersome animation node script in Grasshopper, which is heavy. And then I just talked to GPT-4 like this week, and I was like, can you just run these amplifications and frequencies through an animation node so I can put a trigger on it? And it did it. And I'm like, why have I been node scripting these things together when I just had to ask the computer to make, and then you can read
Mm,
the code. Don't worry about Python and C#. It's like any language. You will hear it
mm,
and you will read it, and your eyes will start seeing it in blocks, just like you adjusted to seeing node scripts. And then you adjusted from icons, right? Because Rhino, you
mm.
don't have to do any of that. You can go right into the Python editor in Rhino and just start scripting. But if you didn't have a history in it, then I think the computational mind probably needs some programming. Like you probably need to know if you're going top down or left to right or right to left or whatever. You've got to have an algorithm. And I think algorithmic studies is probably the most underappreciated word. But if you think you could be, algorithmic modeling in my hometown is done at Fanshawe College Culinary School because they want to know how to cook. That's where algorithmic modeling courses are, in the bakery department. Like that's amazing.
Mm.
But you don't have to apply it to anything architectural or engineering unless you see those things as architectural and engineering. But that's a great
Ex-
question. I
uh,
wish my students, I wish I did have grad students. And that's probably why I have so many online messages, is because I've never gotten trolled. I've never got a bad comment. I'm probably going to get one now because the subjects I do are so either boring or complex or nested that nobody's really going to understand what I'm doing. So they're not going to criticize it. They don't want to sound ignorant. But I find that there's such an international community of people like yourself that will genuinely jump into a digital futures class, talk to one another, ask you for free files. And ideally, I've been dealing in heavy iron casting and smashing bathtubs. I can send a digital file asset to Australia instantly. Like why do I want to work in this mass of what I've been doing physically for so long? And I kind of say I want to reach my ideal weight, my heavenly weight, which is zero, and that's where I am on GitHub and YouTube. And I really enjoy that. It's liberating. And so hopefully people listen
yeah.
to this conversation and they become a little more liberated, but if anything, confidence. Just have it. And what can I say? You don't, maybe there's a way to learn it. You just have to realize that if you're not upsetting a third of the people out there, then you're probably not doing anything, right? Like, and if you're upsetting
Mm.
2/3 of the people out there, you might be getting close to doing something really important, you know? So it's like you always want to have this discord. And the criticism doesn't come through any bad kind of trolling, but I usually get corrected if I type in a quadratic equation wrong and forget the 2a or something. Like, because I make mistakes all the time because I'm not held accountable by any faculty, anybody in my life outside of the peer groups that kind of take interest. And I also oversaturate the market. Like, if I do a poll, I'm like, who wants to learn Rhino, Grasshopper, C Sharp, or wants me to shut up? And then once in a while, I get a couple like, that's enough people. And I'm like, okay, I'll leave it alone. But with
Yeah, yeah.
young children, they don't listen to me. They're 7 to 14. My audience has to be online. It has to be people
Mm.
that know they're creative. And I know 99% of the people following me are more intelligent than me when it comes to math, computers, and scripting. But are they more curious than me? I would have to challenge that, because I think curiosity is probably the best thing going. Absolutely. It's the reason you go places. It's the reason you travel. It's the reason you engage. It's the reason you get past any fear, which is only in the future. So you just, with a little confidence and curiosity, you'll wander in, and it's not a very dangerous environment. I mean, I guess it can go there if you get really good at coding. I don't know. I'm not that good. I haven't reached the
But
level of hackability. Anyway,
yeah,
that's
but
awesome. I thought I thank you so much for letting me voice. I've been looking forward to this honestly all week.
yeah, yeah. But I have like two questions and a rapid fire before we wrap up. So first, like as you said before, like the curiosity, and I see the discipline of learning when I see you, like the consistency in Grasshopper files, the things you tinker with. So any advice for being motivated on this learning journey?
I don't know. Two things that I think help and also hinder. So that it's one and the same. Not having a computer station set up anywhere. I have an Alienware laptop that's the school's. I keep nothing on it. I don't have a 3DM file. I barely have GH files. I have lightweight Python files. At one point, my computer went down and I was using my son's Raspberry Pi. And I was doing the GH Python remote with the one-liners. And I realized I could learn Linux with none of this. So I think having a full station might help me, but I have to carry this stupid heavy Alienware computer with a battery that's always got to be plugged in. I have to have a lamp fan, like a fan to keep it cool. And then at school, I don't have an office. That was the strangest thing. When we renovated our digital lab, we sacrificed all private offices for the sculpture faculty so we could just walk in with our computer and talk openly and have a more open concept. And it really worked. I think we are looking in for new faculty to have a remote office now, but in the building, having to have a computer in front of different audiences. But when it comes to scripting, you do need those 4-hour blocks. Like at 8 o'clock, if my wife's taking the kids to school, I start, right? And I'll sit here until I'm hungry or until I have to renovate the house. Like you do need a place that you can go. But I think maybe that having this disruption on another monitor, another HDMI cable, having to hook it up, having other people to look at your script, we work collaboratively on computers so often in different environments looking at our screens. But as a sculptor or an artist, you always want the collaboration to happen when you're exhibiting it or you're performing. You want people in the room. So I think the thing that's kept me passionate and working a lot is the fact that I try to be collaborate with my computer almost physically, like almost just show up to another location. Like I'll be taking my computer to the Digital Dreams KC Gallery today, and I'll be dropping it out. They'll have the monitors, and I'll say, are you interested in this? And the confidence comes with, I believe math is enough. I believe demonstrating calculus is enough to be beautiful. I don't need somebody to say, why isn't this a screensaver? Why isn't this a pattern of flowers? Why isn't this? No, those growth patterns are based on something so much more beautiful that it should be changeable. But I do think that might answer that question. You said you had two questions, but for me, maybe I would have become a better programmer. Maybe I would have gotten some work. I would have stepped away from teaching in an art school, and I would have worked, because I've met with probably quite a few CEOs and company leaders, and they size up who I am through a conversation like this fairly quickly. And a lot of people don't want to work with me because I'm not really working for anybody. I'm not the task at hand. If you don't know my series, when I get bored with them, it's not a sense of boredom. It's the fact that that becomes a new body of work, right? Just like painters that paint paintings. There's ones that paint the same style their whole life, or the painters you see in the museums have passed away and they've collected a certain body of work. But I guarantee you those artists are always changing their modes and what they're making. We just archive a window into their life. And I don't think that's boredom. I think it's getting more inspired towards something else. And it's that what if. It's like in your head, if you can think it, there's a good chance you probably can do it. And there's probably a very good chance somebody else has been playing with it and trying to do it. I love the forums on Rhino Forum when you get down to about 3 or 4 people. You know, like there's only like, and there's people trying to close the forum because they're paid there to do it. And you keep coming up with these little things to be like, couldn't we get like not just NumPy and Pandas working in that new ode? Like that stuff on getting this last script editor running, I really had fun putting stuff on that forum, probably to the point that I was kind of boasting and showing off a little bit at times. And they're like, wow, that's not really a place for it, Mike. And I'd be like, oh, okay, here's my real question. But boy, did I ever have trouble with that. And nobody's doing this Grasshopper parameters in the Node.js. Can you imagine you're just kicking it off and then somebody, and it's fast with 3JS. It's not fast with just graphics. It's very slow and heavy. So that program is set up to be parametric. And I've done it through oscillation scripts as well. So, I mean, I never had a sense of that, but I didn't say when I left math, I didn't go right into sculpture. I went into film studies. I took a year off. That was just, for anybody who's lost in school and you think you might be not making it, take a half a year to take all the courses you ever wanted. And during my third year, first term, I took the history of narrative film. I took Tolkien studies, like J.R.R. Tolkien studies. I took a class called Mysticism, Magic, and the Occult. I took advanced third year statistics, and I took a fine art class. Like I was just like, I'm going to cast my net as wide as possible and see where I land. Because if I didn't land somewhere, I probably would have never gotten an undergraduate degree. Luckily, statistics still clicked with me, and I got a teachable in mathematics, and that was kind of my please the parents, and I could always go teach in high school, you know, art classes and math classes or phys ed. But in time, I did push the visuals. So I went off track there. What was your next question, Mayor? What was your next question? You had another one.
Yeah, w- yeah. What would be your advice to 20-year-old Michael, or what would you do differently?
Oh, okay. I would never have listened to my father, who was an Anglican minister, and put me in the Anglican college. And I was in a residency, and I was 18, and it was Canada, and I made some life decisions that you shouldn't make. I met some wonderful people, and I still have great friends. But I was not, I remember come midterm doing well in calculus. Everything that came easy because I knew it from high school. But when it became difficult, I found myself not moving to the front of the class. You have to move to the front of the class. You have to find your peers. And don't make the mistake to think you can just buy the textbook and do the final exam for 100%. Do the midterms, quizzes, get the 10%, get every percent you can. Because even if you end up with a 67.5 bell curve, that's pretty darn good. But you don't want to start giving up grades that you have to write a harder thing. And I think I would have enjoyed mathematics because I've realized how much joy I get from it. Like I still keep my textbooks. I still keep my syllabi from 1989. I have my calculus syllabi. I still have those books, and I still read them, and I still translate them in the Grasshopper. I had a passion, but I think obviously I was interested in other things that 19-year-olds were interested in. But that dorm life kind of isolated me away from the university. So Waterloo, if you don't know, the religious colleges are on the other side of the river. I kind of wish they threw me into the villages and I was there with all the people. I had a very special class in the Catholic school, St. Jerome's. The teachers were incredible. I should have spent more time in their offices. Cynthia Struthers, I can remember them by name. Vaughn, I'm trying to remember, Steve Farino. Like, how can I remember these after 30 years, never saying them? These were the giants, your teachers and mentors. I was choosing the wrong mentors, the wrong peers, and I spent a life of, I don't think I did anything, I did things wrong, but in the end, I have a beautiful daughter. I have two beautiful boys. So I did everything wrong right because I ended up in a very beautiful place. And I'm afraid I jeopardized that all if I had to change any of that. But if it's any advice to a 20-year-old, it's the same advice I give my 14-year-old, my kids going to school. If you're there, be there. And just like karate, go to class and practice what you know. That's it. That's how I teach all of my computational classes. I say, you will get a B in this class if you just come to class and practice what you know. That's all you have to do. But the thing is, given the permission to do that, people excel. They want to get promotions. They want to get another belt. They want to know more. They saw somebody coding. But I think that would be the advice. Make sure you're there, showing up, just like in the art world. If you want to be in a gallery, you got to show up. You have to see those spaces. You have to meet those artists. But please don't. And I think the isolation factor really disrupted so much that we're only recovering now. I will admit that our enrollment is incredible for fall. It's terrifyingly high in our sculpture major. I think it's because we do have these digital streams. And it's not that we have an analog stream and a digital stream. The digital stream is going towards CAD modeling more traditionally and to this computational way. And when you have permission, that's, as a teacher, if somebody accidentally says, can I ask you a question? I say, well, that's it. That's your question. So they always have to ask to have two. And so when a student asks permission to do something, before I even hear it, I say yes. I always say yes, because the bad student, I'm going back to the Tao, good man, bad man. The bad student wants the teacher to say no or prohibit it, so they can go back to their peers and say, I have a great idea, but the teacher won't allow me to do it. But if you say yes, it immediately becomes yes, but do you know who's responsible? It's you. And we will do it safely, but yes, we will do it. And I say that the analogy would be, a student came to me when I was a young teacher and said, I want to paint with liquid glass. And I was like, what are you talking about? You can't just paint liquid glass on a canvas. You can't just pour it on there. It'll burn up your canvas. And I said no. But I realized later as a teacher, I should have said yes. And I could have found a refractory, plaster and sand. We could have slumped glass into it. We could have annealed it. We could have. The reason I said no as a teacher was because I didn't know how to do it. So I really have not made that mistake anymore. So with my children, you simply say yes, but how are you going to do it? Right? I have a 14-year-old that can drive it. 14 years old in Kansas. He wants his beginner license. I've said, well, we can do the beginner's license, but you have to do all your laundry. You have to do all your dishes. You have to do all your the lawn cutting. And when you show me you can do all these things, then I think we'll have an easier time teaching driving. But I think the advice to myself was not something I did, and never feel regret. Don't worry about things. I've been drawn into things that have worried me, and they've gotten resolved. There's things in my life I don't want to feel anymore, and regret is one of them. And the other one is, what is it called? It's like when you were worrying about something and then it's just, it's not anxiety, no, anguish. It's when you spent too much of your life worrying about something that worked out anyhow. And you're like, what did I worry about all of that? And a lot of that comes from opinions. Look to the people you want to impress and widen that field. Don't make that. I mean, it's wonderful to impress parents or children or close friends. But if you widen your field, if you find a peer group that believes and motivates you, you'll find as a teacher or anywhere in life, it's those small little letters and notes that get you through the year. It's not the full evaluation of your course. It's not all those, it's not the thing that administratively keeps you employed. It is that little bit that you did something for someone. And that's why I did give credit to people out there. And Pier Nicolo Mussolino, who I never ever say his name out loud, Mussolino, he's always watching. Whenever I do something, he also posts art. He posts paintings. I love this about him. I know he's got a couple of years on me, and he's just been this kind of just belief in me. And I think the advice would be to find those people that believe in you. You don't have to look to yourself to give all the advice to yourself. There are people all your life trying to give advice to you, and you can have major effects on them as well. It's not one way. It's learning and respect, just like karate is back and forth. A black belt can spar a white belt. As long as there's respect, nobody gets physically hurt, but there is a good opportunity of somebody getting hurt if somebody did not respect or trust the other party, and that's reciprocal. So I think I'm an okay teacher. I think I'm pretty good. My students like that I'm there. I've never sought promotion too much. I've been satisfied with an associate professor job while there. I don't write my syllabi out so someone else can teach it. I really like the fact that I have to be the teacher in those classes. And I like that they change because of the student body coming in. It's wonderful to have a class in an art school doing computational design with 8 to 12 people. I would not want to be at the University of Waterloo in a fishbowl doing like 4 gym room exams. There's no way. The disconnect. But I had that relationship with those faculty at the St. Jerome's College that I did not take advantage of to its full extent. And I was too immature, or I was too scared, or I didn't believe in myself or something. And yet all they were was employed to do that. And I guess you can miss generationally what people want to do for you, younger and older. So that's a little emotional, but if you think about it, but you because people make their mistakes, but you can't worry about it. You just move on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I don't get to voice this too much.
Do you have like a few minutes?
Oh, sure. Well, this is amazing. I didn't know that we were going an hour. Well, I mean, I'm just looking over at my other screen.
I have one rapid fire round.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get that.
I have one rapid fire round before we end. If you have a few minutes.
You want me to put something up?
No. I have like few rapid fire questions.
Oh yeah. Please. I will answer them rapid fire.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you have less than 10 seconds, and you have like gotta keep it brief, 5 to 6 words max. Okay.
10 seconds, 5 words.
Am I? Yes. Okay.
Oh, the audio.
Sorry for the audio. Your role model.
Oh, my role model? Oh boy, that's gonna take a second to think about. I'm gonna go back to this guy that inspired it, Daniel Christoph. He's been with me. He was somebody I saw doing something. Yeah, just Daniel Christoph. If you want to check him out, you're gonna have a hard time tracking out his original videos. But if you can sit through that old style of watching a tutorial and debugging it, you'll see how graphically and multi-dimensional calculus his scripts are. And when you talk to him, even in those early stages, he has a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Watch those videos by Daniel Christoph if you've never picked up Grasshopper. And if you've got a mind like that, then maybe you want to start keep following people that followed him.
Got it. Your favorite movie?
Oh, it's a weird one. It was Canadian. It's not a great movie, but I asked the B-Run Theater to play it. It's Quest for Fire. It's absolutely amazing, except it's so non-realistic. They discover fire at Lattle, and it was filmed in the west coast of Canada. And I think Tommy Chong, the daughter of Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, stars in it. It's a total strange movie, but I have had a desire to watch that movie too often in life. It's pretty good. It's not intellectual and it's not academic, but it's pretty darn good. I'm not getting any audio.
Your favorite book?
Actually, a book I go back to, and it's my father's as a priest, and I actually have it by my bed right now. I hadn't picked it up for a couple of years. It's the Confessions by Saint Augustine. And if it isn't that book is incredible. You can pick it up and open it. It's not the City of God or anything by Augustine. It's like what he did wrong in his life, like stealing figs from a tree, until he gets converted to Christianity. But it's his whole life as he comes out of Africa and ends up in Rome. And the other book that I kind of like is a 5-book series. I think it's 4-book series, but there's 2 part 3s. But it's Providence by Saint Anselm. And Saint Anselm, and I go to these religious texts because my father always had them as philosophy, and they were around. But he never sought perfection. He sought the spirit than which nothing greater can be conceived. And this put it on earth with us being here. And to me, that allowed you to have concepts of a God. It allowed you to have concepts of mathematics. It allowed you to have concepts of art. But it is never this Descartesian spirit that, you know, seeks perfection in life or after death. It says we simply aspire to the spirit than which nothing greater can be conceived. And there's a lot of philosophy texts I like as well. I read an awful lot of philosophy in my life. But that one, and that coming out of the 12th century, I mean, like, how did that sustain the urge to know and to study? And then there's plenty other books in that direction. And I'm not there for the religious per se, because I don't really practice too much. I definitely had to go as a child to my father's church. He was a minister. That was his profession. But I think that type of opening up your mind, what does that entail? And that could go to music. That could go to anything. If you can conceive of it, then you can conceive more of it. And that questions the ideas of what success really is, what succession really is, what security really is. Like you start to look at things up and down, you know, for the good and bad qualities.
I see. Your favorite mathematical theory or curve?
It has to come from Euclid's Elements. It has to come that you can start with these principles, and you can start drawing them out. And there are games on computers. Like you don't have to learn from a textbook in Greek on one side and English on the other. Like you can get these little apps. Like what's the one that I have on my phone? It's like Geometry or something AIO, and you just solve to the point that you can't solve anymore. And you solve it with the most basic instruments, which are the geometry of the straight edge and the compass. And I think it's incredible. You get little stars when you win. It's called Euclidia. That's what it's called. And I love this little game. But that comes from your question. Like, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that would be one.
Okay. My last question of the interview: your favorite piece of art?
Now this is painting. It's a little bit of a toss-up in a body of work, but I'm going to put it to Francis Bacon, and that's Francis Bacon, who painted out of England and painted these very visceral. And the reason I said that is I was in New York and I saw his screaming monkey, and it was a monkey behind the cage at a zoo, and it arrested me. I think any piece of art that arrests you, it doesn't have to be an artwork in a gallery, but find the things that arrest you. That work I found myself standing in front of for a long period of time. And so when I find an artist that does that, I realize the styles of Francis Bacon were like Rembrandt, were like Velázquez, like El Greco, and then peers like Lucian Freud. Like I would make pilgrimages out of Canada to New York and Chicago and Buffalo to see pieces like this. But there was something in the painting that was layered. And I do think there's a relation to bronze with that. And I've thought on it. Flat painted works don't impress me. Like I want the glazes, I want the underlay. When you look at a piece of bronze, you're seeing the sun physically in physics come through the wax, through the multiple layer glazes, off of the bronze, and then reflect back through that. There's this sense for the eye that I'm sad to say people with color blindness or visually impaired never get a sense of this visually. But I think those artists, sheer like conservative paint, well, they weren't conservative, he was pretty debaucherous in his life, but Lucian Freud and Francis Bacon also painted together, and they had a way of making the paint something that any house painter could never make paint, right? Like this was something. So I would have to say those artists, maybe not as people or personally, but some of the works I've allowed really to pull me in. There's other ones like Max Beckmann and others as well. But it's funny because they're all painters. And Paul Klee and Kandinsky's work I've gotten more and more into because of the computational design I'm interested in. painters, I would say.
God, awesome.
And that's the
It
last
was
question. I don't know
lovely
when I could
hosting
talk to you
you.
again, Mayor. I would just like to have a forum to say thank you, and how I know you listen and your podcast, and I see the other videos, and I've seen your joy when you introduce people, and on all the videos you're pretty much smiling through what you do, and I think you have. I would really like to encourage you to keep doing it, because it's amazing. And have an opportunity to be here
I get
and join
inspired
this
talking
really
to
big
people
bar.
like you.
Feels great. Yeah, we just don't stop. I don't know what stopped. It's like Eddie Van Halen was a guitarist.